Well, I don't know if we ever assigned you anything because as it was, you were about to have surgery, so
Okay.
you
We'll
were
talk
not.
next. Yeah.
So we'll in our group chat text we can discuss. So I'm bringing Italian chicken, so it's grilled chicken with ricotta cheese, marinara sauce. Marianne's going to do the rice, and then so whatever you think goes well with that.
Okay. I'll let you know.
Okay, just stop right there. I'm old school, okay, and I would like to have a care package of this meal sent to my house.
Right. Let's request that here. We'll do
I
a
need a
dinner.
care
Stephanie and I
package.
will get together, and you guys can send us the food.
That'd be so good. That would be.
We'll work on that.
Okay.
We'll see how we can pull that off.
Oh, all right. So this is a difficult question. So I'm curious to see how this will go tonight with it being, how do we, okay, I'm trying to think how we phrase this. How do we, okay, go, you go.
You don't even have to think of it. So the last question that Marianne prepared for us is, how do you reconcile something a prophet says that is in opposition to what you believe to be true? So before we begin, I wanted to put this out there. Something I heard on, I think it's Stephen Jones. He was talking with a church historian, and the phrase that stuck with me was, we as members of the church, we try to make decisions quickly. We hear something, we bump it up against what we know, and then we try to make a decision quickly about if it's true or not. As opposed to holding tightly to what we know is true through witness, personal testimony, whatever, however we came to know what we know is true, and then show patience to let things work out. And he used an example of when he was a teenager, something came out about Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon, and that it was fake, and that it kind of shook him. And his dad was like, have you read the Book of Mormon? Do you know it to be true? And he was like, well, I don't know. He goes, whatever your testimony is right now, hold to that testimony and then be patient. And then after a few years, it came out that it was all false, that the guy basically plagiarized and was trying to write in Joseph Smith's penmanship, but it wasn't true. So he's like, I could have lost my faith completely, but I followed my dad's direction. And then when the truth came out, I was able to then be reaffirmed in what I know is true. So when we think about our question, the thoughts that have been circling in my mind is, bringing it to today, the prophet tells us to do something or provides guidance. Is it because we are removed spiritually from the church that when he says it, it's hard for us to hear and understand? Have we aligned ourselves with other people's beliefs, i.e., politics has become our religion, and because things that the prophet is saying no longer mesh with what we believe politically? Or is it that something has happened to us? Our free agency was taken away by someone else using their free agency, and now our faith has been shook because, as a friend of mine who's like my adopted mom said, that when I prayed for the Lord to save my son, he didn't save my son. And so I had a crisis of faith. So when we put all that together, if the prophet is telling us that we need to be in the temple, we need to pray, scripture study, minister, whatever it is, depending on where we are in our lives, how do we respond to it? Because if we're not spiritually connected, then it's possible that we see their guidance, his guidance, or the quorum of the 12, because we sustain them as prophets, seers, and revelators, do we see their counsel as an opposition to what we think and believe? And now I'll be quiet. No laughing, Carolyn and Marion. Rachel just wants to smile, so it's okay. Go, Carolyn.
Okay. Do you think it's possible to be more than one thing? So, like, I don't have my testimony shaken by, for example, mistakes that prophets have made. That does not shake my testimony. The questions I have about LGBTQ folks, it doesn't shake my testimony, and yet I think it's an evolving church, and I think it will change. So I guess I'm wondering, can both of those things exist in one body?
Mhm. Have you guys heard, I forgot her name. She is a historian. She died recently, but she wrote a book.
Melissa.
No, it's not
That's what
Melissa. She's amazing.
Wait a
It's somebody
minute.
else though.
I can't hear you.
Sorry. So she wrote a book called Both Things Are True. Joseph Smith also has a very famous quote that said, I'm trying to think of it, in proving contraries, truth is made manifest. So to that particular question, I think yes, because it is by navigating what appear to be opposites that we come to truth. I've seen it in my own life, because basically what it makes you do is actually look and seek for truth, right? So if you know this is true, but wait a sec, they don't seem to mesh. That's when we have to actually do some digging. That's why we do some digging, right? Because they don't seem to fit. Otherwise, we wouldn't ask or care. I think there's a lot of things you could say about that particular question, but I would say, yes, I do think both things can be true. I think there is truth in the need to navigate opposites and find truth in that. So I think that's an interesting question to think about. And I think it goes back to Ramses's idea that we can't come to a decision quickly, because when you're doing that kind of work, you don't come to a decision quickly. It takes work and thought and prayer and inspiration and overcoming our own stumbling blocks, and our leaders overcoming their stumbling blocks, all of us trying to overcome our stumbling blocks as we're trying to figure this out together. So I guess as far as that question goes, I feel like, yeah, I think that is a reality as we're trying to figure this out together.
Go on, Stephanie. I see your lips ready.
So, I don't think like the average bear.
The average bear.
And so, and that's because I've been living on my own since I was 14, and I've seen the world. As to the point of the prophet making mistakes, the thing is that this is the way the Spirit brought me up. I listen to the prophet. I follow his dictate as long as it's with it's following the gospel. Okay. The only person I put on the pedestal is God the Father and Jesus. Everybody else is going to make mistakes, and I will allow for grace for that. Now, will I just come out and say, no, I can't, I don't believe in the prophet? No, I believe, especially nowadays, I see the things that he does or they do. I just sit back and look and say, oh, you see how that worked out? You know what I'm saying? What happened in the past seems like it was really bad. But our prophets now seem like they're on a better track. This LBG, whatever, my mind just goes numb. But I stick to the gospel principle that we should love one another. And I believe with the LBG, whatever, Satan is kind of using that to twist things. But the thing is, I am to love them. And there's one principle people overlook. There is only one God, and you commit to only one God. Okay. And when it comes to LBG, whatever, if they're loving only that one person, then they're grasping hold to the principle that God can work on, that he can make that progression. You know what I'm saying? Fidelity and faithfulness to one being, one person, to me, is probably the most magnanimous thing we can do, as you know, besides loving one another. But being faithful to one, that's deep, you know. So, I mean, that was a convoluted thing. It's called the minefield of my life here. Hopefully I made some kind of sense in that. But yeah.
Good,
But
Stephanie.
as far as the prophet is, it's just like, I will listen. And if it's good, like, you know, I'll do anything as long as it doesn't destroy somebody's liberty or their life or cause them emotional trauma, you know, because those things go against the gospel principles. So other than that, sure, you want me to pay off my mortgage? I'll do the best I can. Who was the one prophet that said everybody pay off their houses and then the stock market crashed in 2008? So, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It wasn't. So the question, Carolyn, I'll let you restate your question.
Oh, okay. Can you recognize that prophets make mistakes and at the same time and question decisions that come along that seem, and I'm going to say it a little different, that may seem unjust, and have both of those things going on? And I mean, be a believer, not have your faith shaken, but recognize prophets make mistakes and some things seem very unjust, decisions that prophets make.
And LaSonia, it was in reference to LB, the alphabet group, because I, like Stephanie, I mess it up. So I don't ever, people like, you shouldn't say it. I'm like, I'd rather say the alphabet group than put in extra vowel letters that are not there. It brings me to the thought of, I remember we were still in Texas when it came out that if you are a same-sex couple, that if your child is of baptismal age, they're not allowed to be baptized. And I remember a lot of people were upset about that, and they asked my opinion, and I said, you're looking at it from a secular perspective. I was like, if you look at it from the tenets of the gospel doesn't preach homosexuality or same-sex attraction. We recognize that happens and it's there, but it doesn't preach that. So their concern is for the child, not for the adults, because of the potential confusion that may happen with the child. And then they, through probably further revelation and conversation, they came off of that a little bit. But I also look at, so that kind of points to what you're saying, Carolyn. But then the whole premise of, I hear people, well, the church is against the group because of their lifestyle. I was like, but if you put in proper perspective, we as members of the church, we believe in the law of chastity. So if you're running off doing things and you're not married, you're not living the law of chastity. You just feel like they're being picked on because they're with they're in a same-sex relationship. But it goes for the same for a heterosexual relationship. You're not living the law of chastity. You're not living the tenets of the gospel, which kind of is what Stephanie was saying, that if they're in a monogamous civil marriage, then they're living the gospel in that aspect because they're in a monogamous relationship. Marion, your fingers are twitching, which means you have something.
He knows how to read you now.
I'm not sure I have anything to offer. Only because I'm finding myself in a really interesting space. I think what's happened to me this past year, my eyes are being opened to stuff that I refused to look at before. I was taught to keep my eyes closed. Don't look at it, don't see it, don't talk about it. I know this because, you know, Mark, he says what he thinks. He didn't get the message like I did. He does his thing, no matter what we're taught. But I have another brother that I used to watch that is like me. And he refused to look at something that came up in our family. And that was uncomfortable to me, his stance on this. But as I thought about it, I'm doing the same thing. So I think I kind of feel like my life has exploded this year. I'm trying to put things back in place in the correct spot. So if I'm quiet, it's because I'm learning. Yeah.
You're good.
I'm watching and trying to be willing to look at stuff that has been so uncomfortable to me in the past that I've refused to acknowledge it and look at it. And it's more than just race.
Right.
I've talked to Carolyn and Rachel about this, that I'm finding myself going down lots of paths that I haven't dared to venture before. So
I think even this question is a scary path, right? Like, I think even asking this question is a little bit nerve-wracking because we're not supposed to ask the question.
That's why I asked it. And the fact that I could ask it is a step forward for me.
Yeah.
And you know what else is really beautiful is that you could ask it in this group, and I could ask kind of a question that I could be judged on, but I don't feel that from this group. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I think is whatever. I don't know. For me, I don't know that I have a perfect answer. I don't know that anybody has a great answer to this one. I think you make a choice of whether to stay in the church and try and sustain things to the best of your ability, or you choose not to because you legitimately don't feel like you can. You lose something. I think I would lose more leaving than staying and trying to work through this process. I think I actually gained something from working through this process because I'm pushed up against a wall in ways I wouldn't be otherwise.
I think that's a point for me that I have discovered that I'm all in. I'm not going anywhere.
Same.
Yeah, same. I mean, it's funny because I've even laughed with some people and I'm like, I could totally see if anything were to happen where somebody got upset with me, I would be like, okay, I'll see you next Sunday. You know what I mean? Like, I almost feel like, no, I belong in this space because I want to be in this space. And there's not a whole lot that whatever else somebody else would say or do in regards to my own process of faith building that would make me not be in this space. So I've just had too many experiences that I wouldn't want to give up. And maybe some people, I mean, I know people who do, like, for them, the pain of staying in the church is too much, right? But for me, it's not, but it definitely poses problems and difficulties in our own questions. But for me, that's part of the process. I guess for me, that is what this life is about. It's about us having to figure this out with God, right? That's what
It's about how much support you have. I can tell you, I told my bishop, I said, if I leave this church, I'm not going anywhere else, because honestly, it's the same everywhere, you know. But and I'm just gonna say I'm grateful for all of you guys, because it's just like, okay, somebody woke me up. I guess I'll come out of the cave now. But I'm at the point where I almost want to go back in the cave. But yeah, I really appreciate it, because there's people out there who feel the same way, want to make change, and that gives me the drive to continue on. You know, yeah, I appreciate all of you. I just want to say that right now.
Thank you. Lasagna, I want to hear what you want to say.
Do you want me to stop the
Well,
recording?
I'm going to say this one part, but there's this one part I don't want to say, but I want to speak in regards to what what Carolyn said. But one thing I am finding is that the prophet, just in general, and prophets in general, that they definitely are human. They do have their own feelings in spite of being the prophet. They disagree with things in spite of being the prophet, but there's an organization and then there's their own feelings. And I just have had an opportunity to gain more and more testimony of, that just in general about the fact that they definitely have their own feelings. Bye,
Ramses.
Okay. So I've been learning that a lot lately. And so I have a greater, I think, appreciation of the weight that they're carrying as a prophet of God, but as a human. They don't agree and understand all of the things, even though they can go and they're close, but God doesn't take away their agency and their feelings any more than he does the next person. And to me, that has been what has given me a greater respect. It's just like I said about Brigham Young. A lot of things happened with Brigham Young, but for me and my family, Brigham Young was very influential as to how I raised my kids. The things that I tried to do, the path and the journey that I took had a lot to do with what Brigham Young taught. And so I've had to say, yes, he's a man, he's human, but was he a prophet? I definitely believe he was a prophet. I do not believe any less that he was a prophet. I believe he was carrying a huge weight and trying to deal with everything. And the bottom line is he was still a man. He had his feelings, his perceptions, his perspectives as well. And just because you're a prophet, God doesn't take that away from you. And so for me, that has been a powerful aspect, as well as seeing so much of what Brigham Young taught coming back full circle. To me, full circle means everything. And I see so many things that he said and seeing things that are happening today. The same thing with President Nelson and everyone else. I think about COVID and people all fuss about, COVID. I think he had that weight too, and he made that decision. But in the end, it's the family's choice. The family can pray and ask just as anybody else does, is this the right thing for my family? Some families didn't feel like that was right. And that's okay, because that's between you and God. That's the same thing, whether it's abortion or anything else. We are entitled to personal revelation ourselves. The prophet is responsible for the church, and that's a huge organization. And so that's just my feeling in regards to that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do think, and then I'm going to stop the recording unless anybody else has something else to say. I'll record as long as people want to say something for it. But I know Lasonia had something else. But I do think that, and I've seen this in some people. I think it was Jana Reese. She wrote something about how she believed in the principle of tithing, but was struggling with the church and how they're utilizing the money at this time. And so she just stopped paying tithing to the church, but would pay 10% somewhere else. So in her relationship to God, she was doing right. Obviously, that's going to have implications for her because the church, I don't think, probably counted that as tithing. But she was okay enough in herself, right, to be like, I am following my personal faith, right? I am following what my personal integrity is telling me to do, and I still will belong to this church. I will still do my best to uphold and sustain where I can uphold and sustain. And I really kind of honor that perspective. I think some people probably wouldn't, but I feel like I do because she was trying to stay true to herself and she was also trying to sustain leadership, right? And I don't know if maybe sometimes that would be the walk that people walk and still function and move within this church. So that was just an interesting she was very secure in herself, I think, and her ability to be okay doing this, right? I don't know that everybody would feel emotionally secure enough to be able to do that. So, but I did think that was interesting. Any thoughts that people want to share before
I do that with fast offering, and I actually have heard, that is actually okay. You know, like in my ward, you know, like I was saying, for self-reliance, they have I think it's a stumbling block for them. And so when I find that there's someone in need, because I know that I've been helped, I may take my fast offering and provide assistance to that person. And I'm like, and I look at, I'm like, God, you know what? This is where I'm gonna donate, because right now they need this, and they're not gonna have to jump through any hoops to get it, and they don't have to fill out a paper. They don't, you know, because when people are in need, they're in need. And so I feel like it's what's placed on your heart to do. And so I agree with that. You know, I don't mess with tithing only because I know tithing has to do with the temples. But when it comes to fast offering, if I was going to take 2 meals and share that with somebody, and I always find that it seems to work, not 2 meals, but the money that I would have taken, I'm like, that's what fast offering is for, to me. And so I will definitely, if there's needs, like things that were happening, I will do that. And I don't have no shame, and I don't feel bad about it. And I feel like God's totally fine with it.
Oh, yeah. I'm like that too. As far as tithing goes, it's just like I am told to pay 10%. You misuse my money. It's not my money. It's God's money. And trust me, it's coming down the pike.
Right.
Okay. But that fast offering, it's just like if somebody needs something, I use it, because I have seen where they like, well, I don't think you're worthy enough for this, that, and the other. They need food. I'm taking them, shopping. At Genesis, it's just like I was doing that. We have, I'm sorry, a potluck. Okay. I have to buy all the cutlery and stuff like that. I mentioned to the priesthood holders, maybe I should have a little budget. I don't have time to beg. I just do it. Okay. I just do it. And the Lord knows I'll just do it. I don't have time to beg. I still remember one day, and it's just funny. I don't mean to toot my horn or anything, but it was just funny. We're in Genesis, and the Lord just kind of poked me and said, "Turn around and look at that missionary's shoes." And I turned around, and I looked, big old holes in his shoes. I go, "Got it, Lord." I said, "Elders, what are you doing on Monday? I need you to meet me at DSW at this time." And they're like, "Okay." So they show up. "So what are we going to do? Are we going to move something?" I said, "No, you get a chance to buy a pair of dress shoes apiece." I didn't tell them, like, the Lord said, buy you some shoes, okay? I'm buying both of you some shoes.
Mhm.
I love that, Stephanie.
Mm.
It's like, he just poked me. Look at his shoes. Okay, got it. Yeah. We can't have him represent like that.
That's such a real deal. Like, that is such a real deal, how I know the Lord prompts people to do things, because this thing that I went to this weekend, to this Black Farmers conference, I basically told them I had registered way back when it first started. And then someone was like, well, are you going? And I said, well, no, I don't have the money to go. And I was trying to rent a car and it didn't work out. This sister, literally this weekend, like, she literally loaned me her car. We went there, and yeah, we were able to go there, and she's like, the Lord said do this. And so I did. And I spent all weekend with my daughter, and it was just really amazing. And it's like, I truly believe it's, as we're prompted to do things, that's how it flows. But anyways, so that's all I had to say to that. And then I can speak on the other, but I don't have to.
Yeah, well, it did you guys, anybody else have anything else to say? I feel like for me, it's just a bunch of I don't knows, and I'm trying to work it out. But that's where I'm at. So
Yeah.
I'm going to stop the recording then. And